tear, it falls and hits the ground. A tree, it falls without a sound. A bird, it calls and sends you home. A man, he sits in the cold all alone.
Hey, and welcome to the Joy of Sunflowers. I am about to talk to Renee Higgins. I hope you enjoy the interview.
Hi,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm good.
Good. I'm so excited to finally connect.
Yeah, I know. It's been crazy. I was quite unwell in the first, like trying to do this, and yeah, now I'm kind of more balanced.
Yay. Good. Well, I think it's so important. And I was really happy you reached out. I think like there's a lot more we can do too on social media to raise awareness about the event so more people know about it and participate. I think it's great. And on my journey, I felt so lost in the beginning. I went through infertility and IVF and the beginning of my first miscarriage completely alone. I just had my partner. I didn't talk to anybody else. And then I found the online Instagram community. And once I started connecting with people who had been through similar things, like the difference in my mental health and my wellness was huge. And so, I kind of felt lost before that. And it was a really important resource for me for my second miscarriage as well. Having those connections already built and relying on it and connecting with people who had already been through this. So yeah, I'm super excited to participate.
Yeah, no, I was actually in the same boat. I didn't know about the community. I had my miscarriage, and then I kind of didn't look on purpose though. Like I avoided researching and looking. The only thing I researched was what I was gonna be facing because I was gonna do it naturally. So I just was like, I'm just gonna not even look. And I think it wasn't necessarily on my radar at all. Like as in I didn't even
Same.
know to, don't know to, but yeah, I mean maybe that means that we're not loud enough. I don't know.
Well,
doesn't show people, what we're all about, what we're going through, because they're just like, oh, they're pregnant, so we'll give them all the nice things.
Yeah. Focus on the exciting pregnant people. Yeah.
don't have them prepared. Just
no. No, it's so true.
Yeah. It needs
to
be rectified.
Oh, for sure. I think if I had known and had the connections to the infertility community and the lost communities on Instagram earlier, yeah, I think it would have totally changed how I was dealing with it at the time. And I know that's true because my second miscarriage for me was totally different than my first because I had those support systems in place already. So yeah, no, I think it's super important and exciting to have an event kind of, bringing a bunch of people together. So your focus for the event is on pregnancy and baby loss, right? Not necessarily infertility.
Yeah, no, it is infertility. So we have
it is. Okay.
Yeah, we have a range of speakers. This event is called the Joy of Sunflowers, Sisterhood through Infertility and Pregnancy Loss.
Oh, okay. Oh, perfect. Right up my alley.
Yeah, so we have a mixture of people who are speakers. In fact, one of my speakers is an amazing woman. She suffers through cystic fibrosis, and she doesn't necessarily have sort of infertility per se. Like she can do have kids, but she shouldn't for health reasons.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is as much part of this as anything else, because obviously, that is almost an infertility, because I mean, if you
totally is,
if you don't survive a pregnancy, then you can't really do it.
Yeah.
The whole point
is live birth.
to be a mother and to do those things and to continue. You don't want to have a baby to then leave it or try and get pregnant and then you lose your life and the baby's life.
Oh my gosh.
So No, it's pretty devastating. She's only one of 21 women in the world who have managed to have a baby normally.
Wow.
Fibrosis.
Wow.
It's amazing. Like I'm hearing
I had no idea.
I didn't know either. I'm hearing so many amazing stories and
There's so much.
I've cried. I've cried a lot.
Oh yeah. And it's crazy because I think that everyone's journey is so different and everyone has their own unique problem. And that's why it's so challenging. It's so hard to find the fix for because everybody's so different. But even though all of our journeys are different, what I've noticed is the suffering and the challenges tend to be more similar. You know, we seem to be going through a lot of the same traumas and struggles, and the same coping strategies tend to work for us all. So, yeah, all the more reason to bring us all together, right?
Yeah, and it's so true. There are a lot of similarities. In fact, I said to someone the other day, I was like, you know, we all feel the sort of same way. Yeah, we may express ways, we try different things, but in the end, we're all experiencing specific emotions like the guilt, the sadness, the broken
emptiness.
The emptiness, and that kind of longing, and there's just all these emotions that, and we're all feeling them. I mean, anger as well. That's a big one.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Gosh, and it's anger at yourself, anger at your body, anger at other people as well. But
yeah,
it's a roller coaster.
It totally is. And you nailed it. That's one of my favorite ways to describe, you know, the journey to parenthood being so challenging is that roller coaster, the ups and the downs. And I think that kind of grief, like that very long-term drawn out grief cycle is unlike anything else. It really is unique to infertility and pregnancy loss and disease because, you know, you're just constantly on your feet and you feel like this is it. I'm happy. Everything's going to be great. And then the next day you could be at the bottom of that roller coaster cliff again, trying to fight your way back up. And yeah, the ups and the downs are just, it's unreal. It's so difficult to navigate.
Yeah, and even when you've fixed the problem, like you've had baby, you know, you become that earthside mother.
Yeah.
You'll have to deal with everything that came before that. So
trauma follows you forever.
It's not like, oh yeah, you have a baby and it's fixed, you're done,
you're erased.
Everything's amazing. No. You still have to deal with like PTSD, trauma, all that stuff that kind of has impacted you and just gotten into your brain, and you get those memories and those images, and it's just and I mean, I thought getting pregnant would fix.
So did I.
You know, like and I was like, oh, you know, we just have to get pregnant and I'll feel better.
Yeah, everything will be great. Yeah. But it never was. Even when everything was fine, it never was.
It's terrifying. You're just terrified.
It's terrifying.
Like, the whole time. And then I can feel like if I'm pregnant right now, and if this baby's born and the baby's fine, I feel like I'm going to be on that baby. Like it's not going to have any space to do it. I'm going to be like, right. You know, yes, they're breathing. I'm going to check them every 5 minutes. It's not.
It's crazy. You just said if the baby is born. And that is something else that's unique to people who have been through infertility and pregnancy loss. Because if you talk to someone that's never been through that, it's when the baby is born. But we we have to shift it. We have a totally different mindset because we've been through all that trauma. It's crazy how much it changes you to your core. And then you get pregnant, and you know, if you have a live birth, it doesn't undo that you've had that repeated pattern, you know, potentially for years of every single worst case scenario has happened to me over and over and over again. And now you're supposed to believe that this time it's for real. And it's really hard because you've been in that place where you thought it was for real and it wasn't. And I think it's a lifelong grief cycle. And I think it alters your mindset for life. Honestly, I don't think it's the kind of grief that you can ever fully recover from and go back to the pre-grief self that you were. You're just kind of a changed person forever after.
Yeah, I know a lot of women struggle with that changed person.
Oh yeah.
Have you had the same experience?
Oh yeah. I like my pre-infertility self and myself today are totally different. I can see it just looking at pictures of myself. I can tell the pictures before infertility and after infertility. When I smile and laugh now, my cheeks hurt because it's not something that I do as often as I did before infertility. I caught myself smiling in the mirror the other day. It's like weird to me for a second. So, it's totally different. I used to be like the happy-go-lucky life of the party, super outgoing, love to get out, be around people, and infertility just changed my personality, honestly. Like I'm afraid to leave the house and it's just always on my mind. It's like, am I going to catch COVID? Is that going to change my cycle? I better stay away from these people. Is that person sniffling a little bit? It's like every 10 seconds, it's there. The thoughts are there, and it's just not something that you can turn off. But I do think I hate to sugarcoat or silver lining, the kind of grief and trauma that I've been through. And I don't credit infertility with what I'm about to say. I credit my own personal growth. I feel that I was in a privileged place in my life. And this has really given me a lesson on privilege to be able to see that, I took things for granted before. I don't take them for granted anymore. I look at fertile people and I don't think that, they realize that they are actually just privileged just from being able to do what your body's supposed to do. I don't think that they understand that, but I do find that from that struggle, I can now relate a lot better to other people's struggles and things that they're going through. I don't give the same unsolicited advice that I did before. I just sit there and listen because I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of that from my perspective with my disease and my struggles. And so now I know how to react around other people in ways that are much more empathetic and supportive and productive. And I find I have a lot of people tell me, you're a really good listener. And yeah, there's a reason for that. But I do think that has changed me in those ways. I don't think it's necessarily going to make me a better mom. I think I always was, going to be a good mom someday. But I think for my own personal growth, going through this trauma and the things that I had to change on my own self to survive that, and the connections that I've built and the lessons that I've learned, those are things that I'll carry with me for life for sure.
Yeah, I don't like to do the whole silver linings either.
I know.
You don't want to call it something that's positive.
Nothing good has come out of it. Yes. It's awful.
It's horrible, but
yes,
and you're right. And we do feel and change. And sometimes those changes are actually a good thing. But I mean, for me, I see it as, I'm a Christian, so I see it as God making something good come out of something horrible.
I love that.
He's making something that was ugly and horrible into something less horrible. And and kind of half beautiful. I don't know. I feel it's changed me in terms of I've been humbled. I felt
yes, that's a great way to put it. Yes, I can relate to that for sure.
And the gratitude wasn't there, and it's now.
Nope.
It is now.
Yep. I totally agree.
And the being alive bit as well, because you get, when you find out you're going to miscarry, there's these fears of, okay, this happened to me, and now I'm terrified of like hemorrhage and all these other things. And
so, it's hard when you have that worst case scenario thing happen, because now you're like, well, if that's going to happen, what's the next worst case scenario? And you start imagining those things. And it obviously, infertility has changed me in many, many, many worse ways than the good ways that I've mentioned, right? But one of the other ways infertility has changed me is if somebody, you know, there's some project at work and there's like a 1% chance of something going wrong, I focus in on that 1%. And I've noticed I am much more risk averse. I'm very much like, we need a backup plan for this little 1% thing that probably will never happen. But what if it does, you know? And I think that that's because of what I went through in my personal life, you know, I was the 1%, you know, I was the 1% of people who need repeated IVF cycles at age 34 to conceive and go through, you know, consecutive miscarriages. And yeah, I think once you're part of that, it's hard to try to imagine a world where you're not part of that worst case scenario, where you don't have to worry about the worst case scenarios as much as the ones that happen much more often for everybody else.
Yeah.
But,
Well, let's go
yeah.
into your story so everyone can
Yeah, back up.
know about it. Yeah, because obviously, you know,
Yay.
we've kind of got put the cart before the horse and gone, yeah,
Totally.
do
Just got
this.
excited.
Yeah, it's changed us.
Yes.
It's changed you. So yeah, let's go into your story and sort of how you're here and how we're talking about this in your life. So we'll maybe start from the beginning, even as far back as
Yes.
you know, wanting kids or not wanting them, and you know, getting married and realizing you do want them or something. Whatever is your beginning.
I love it.
Let's go from there.
So yeah, I have known since I was born that I wanted to be a mom. Like I remember being like 5 years old and my mom was pregnant with my little sister. And so it was very real to me and I was very much aware of it. And I kept thinking, oh, what if I'm pregnant too? Wouldn't that be fun? 6 years old. Obviously, I had no idea these things happen, right? But I remember like rubbing my belly and thinking like, oh, I'm probably pregnant too, you know. Like I really wanted a baby. And then my sister was born, right? And I'm 7 years old and I'm rocking my sister, feeding her her bottle, loving it, eating it all up. And, you know, for fun, she called me mom when she was growing up, you know. It was like a game for us because I wanted to pretend to be her mom, right? And so I always wanted to be a mom. I always had that motherly bond with my little sister, 7 years younger than me. And, you know, I loved playing with dolls and pretending that they were moms and babies. You know, I always wanted like the baby Barbies and the big Barbies and pretending they were a family. And, you know, it was always there, that wanting, you know, and I actually thought for a while when I was single about becoming a single mom because my pull to motherhood was that strong. But I decided to try to give it a chance to find the right relationship. And by the time that came along and we got to a point where we were ready to start trying to have kids, I was 30 years old, went off birth control, you know, thought, you know, it's probably going to happen in the next 3 months, right? And my mom actually was super fertile. She got pregnant her first try with me and my brother, and then my little sister was a surprise. So I thought, I'm not going to have any struggle. Not a single person in my family ever struggled. As far as I'm aware, in my entire extended family, there was only ever one early miscarriage. And everyone, you know, conceived their two children really close together. So, you know, I'm not aware of any struggles. It really totally caught me off guard. So much so that it never crossed my mind that my body could be our issue. And that's how sure I was that no, you know, I must be fertile. So that was a huge shock to me when, you know, after a year of nothing happening, get the referral to the fertility clinic. They sent me for some tests and they set us down over video chat and they say, okay, we have your test results back, Renee. And your antral follicle count is this, your FSH is this, your AMH is this. That's consistent with diminished ovarian reserve. And I honestly don't remember the rest of the call. I completely blanked out. I was in complete shock. And at the end of it, I remember thinking in my head, like, I'm probably gonna have like 25 antral follicles at 6. I remember thinking in my head, like, I'm probably above average AMH for my age because I'm probably super fertile, but my AMH was 8 pmol, which is 1.1 on the US scale, more commonly used one. And my FSH was really high. It ranged between 12 and 20. So my ovaries were struggling to make those eggs. And they said, we really have no time to waste. Some months, my numbers were actually perimenopausal. So they wanted to move us right away to IVF. So we were to try one IUI cycle, which failed, and then IVF. We went to IVF, and I remember getting the bill from the clinic. They wanted $30,000 Canadian upfront. I was like, oh my God. So we had to private pay for our IVF cycles. We took equity off our house, and it's basically like remortgaging our home. And first IVF cycle, I was still honestly in denial at this point. Like 6 months after diagnosis, I'm still like, no, they're wrong. Everything's gonna be great. I'm probably gonna get 4 blasts. So we went to retrieval. They had 5 eggs. And that was devastating to me because I just, even though like I kind of knew we were getting like 7-ish eggs, it just was really devastating because I kept thinking they were wrong. And I think that's when it really, really hit me that, ooh, this is really not good. We're going to really struggle. And then the day after the retrieval, I got a call that only one of the eggs had fertilized. So I was already in like a really bad place with thinking, this is probably not going to work. And it finally hitting me that this is for real happening. And it really is me, and they're right about my problems. And then we get that. So that was terrifying. They said, this might be your golden egg. We want to transfer it. This might be your last chance. And it was terrifying. We transferred it, and we got pregnant. And then I remember, so like the infertility roller coaster, right? I remember being on such a high. I thought for sure this is it, because we had never gotten pregnant before. Whatever the issue was, they've gotten around it with IVF, and now everything's going to be fine. It was Black Friday. I went and I bought a bunch of maternity clothes. My betas were coming in. They were doubling. I was so sure everything was great. And then, just on a hunch, the nurse was like, I'm going to have you come in for one more beta. And I was like, yeah, I love that. It really reassures me that the numbers are doubling and everything. And that one had barely risen. Everything just stopped. And then they had me on an ectopic watch. They were concerned that I could have an ectopic pregnancy. Eventually, they diagnosed me with a blighted ovum. And by that point, I was probably 7 weeks pregnant. And then they don't like make you stop your meds just off one scan. They get you to come back in a week. Well, that was the longest week of my entire life, and I was Googling online and trying to talk to people and trying to find like the 1% success stories, and maybe that's going to be us. And no, it wasn't. So we stopped all meds, and it's crazy. I can say luckily, but luckily my body realized what was happening and let go of the pregnancy a few days after I stopped meds. So I didn't have to take any kind of intervention, which at the time really meant a lot to me. And I just wanted to kind of move on. And that didn't end up happening in my second miscarriage. So I think, I can appreciate my first one and how smoothly it went a lot more because of my later bad experience. So after we healed from that, we regrouped for IVF number 2. And I kept thinking, well, it can't possibly get any worse, but it did. So we primed and, followed like the golden protocols for diminished ovarian reserve. Went in, they retrieved 3 eggs this time. And then we got the call the next day, none had fertilized. And we had used ICSI both of our IVF cycles, which is supposed to improve fertilization rates. So it was even more discouraging. There's not really anything else that we could do at that point. And I just felt really low. We met with our doctor, and my doctor at the time, we didn't really connect. She was very, to the point, harsh, medical, clinical. And I needed someone a little bit softer because I was in a really dark place, and I needed someone that I felt that I could trust and kind of have a little bit of a connection with and be very empathetic with me. But she kept pushing me to donor eggs. And that was something that my partner and I were not yet ready for. And we weren't ready to close the door on my eggs, especially that we had gotten pregnant. our first cycle. So, you know, it was a very difficult decision, but we ended up deciding to switch clinics for a number of reasons. I actually ended up getting a call from a third-party donor egg agency, and my information had been shared with them against my consent. They repeatedly called me, left voicemails on my phone. I kept ignoring them, emailed me. Then they called my work phone. So I had to tell the woman, like, I actually did not consent to my information being shared. I specifically said I didn't want to call because this is not something that we're ready for. And it's very difficult to feel like my doctor and I are not on the same page about this. So yeah, we switched clinics. I spoke to a whole bunch of people on Instagram, and I found Markham Fertility Center and Dr. Garcia. And at the time, switching was very scary because, you know, restarting and the months delay when I'm already being told, you know, you don't have a lot of time. But in hindsight, it was the best decision I could have ever made, because even if we're not successful, I'll feel now that we tried everything, and I have full confidence in my doctor. And I think that finding that level of trust is really important. So I'm really glad we made that move. And our third IVF cycle actually went fairly well. So we had 4 eggs retrieved, and that was on a mini IVF. So my first 2 IVFs were like max dose, blast the eggs, try to get as many as you could. But the third IVF cycle, we wanted quality over quantity, more gentle approach with them, especially because we knew I had poor egg quality and fertilization issues. And my doctor also wanted to take a leap of faith and try IVF fertilization, just mixing the sperm and the egg in a petri dish, see what happens. So it was scary because typically that has a lower fertilization rate than ICSI. But in our case, half of our eggs fertilized. So we had a much higher fertilization rate. We had 1 in 6 mature eggs with ICSI, and now 2 out of 4 mature eggs with IVF. So she totally nailed it with mini IVF and IVF fertilization. And we ended up with 2 day 3 embryos. One of them made it to day 5. We transferred it and got a positive beta. And now I thought, you know, the first miscarriage was just super unlucky. No, this is it. Here I am back at the high of the roller coaster. And this time I told her, you know, it was on this day that my beta stopped doubling. And they were like, well, you know, we don't want to freak you out. We just want to do the first 2. I'm like, no, we need to do it on this day. And so till that day, I did not let myself get excited about the pregnancy. I tried not to think about it. And then when that day came, my beta number came back and it had doubled. So double. Everything was going great, way better tracking than my first pregnancy. This is it, right? But I still was having a really hard time getting connected with the pregnancy and believing that this was happening. So I went and bought a pregnancy day-by-day book, and every day I would read the entry of like what's developing with the baby and imagining that happening inside me. And I worked really hard with a therapist and speaking to people online to try to, you know, get a little bit excited about it and relax and not stress. And, you know, I really wanted to be able to enjoy it. And I tried really hard to get there, and I eventually did. And then we went in for our first ultrasound, another blighted ovum. And this time we had waited a whole extra week because I was like, you know, I don't want there to be any question like there was the first time when they said maybe it's too early. So we waited a whole extra week. It was a nightmare wait, only to find that out. And then again, you have to wait a week to confirm before you can do anything. And then it was just like salt in the wound that my body refused to let go of this pregnancy. It, you know, I waited a week, nothing was happening. My HCG was still rising, you know, the sac was just hanging out. So my doctor wanted me to take misoprostol, and I was coming up on about 10 weeks gestation at this point. So almost at the point where they don't recommend that anymore. So it was like, you know, you either do it now or you miss your shot. I really wanted a DNC, honestly. I didn't want to go through the pain and, you know, seeing everything and just wondering what's going on. I actually ended up in the ER after my first miscarriage because everything just happened so quickly. It's crazy how quick my body had let go. It was like 5 hours and then it was done. So I just lost a lot of blood, and I didn't want to risk that happening again. So the second pregnancy, really wanted a DNC, but they were concerned, you know, that it might add further complication. We're already in such a dire strait, and 1% chance of complication. Well, what if that's us? So yeah, I did the misoprostol. Didn't work. Still, I was in agonizing pain. Basically, it's one of the drugs they use to induce labor. It was quite painful. Nothing happened. Stopped. I waited 4 days, and then I had to take another dose of it the day that I was 10 weeks pregnant. And then finally, my body let go, and that was a more drawn out miscarriage. I think is more like the average experience, unlike my first one where it was so quick. And so we healed from that. And then my fourth IVF cycle, it took 3 takes, and every attempt, every month that we tried to do IVF and I took all the needles, I was only growing 1 egg. So it was a nightmare. Finally, the third time it happened, we went for it with our 1 egg. It didn't make it to day 5. So we were left with nothing. And then we took a little break, did some androgel priming in December, and then we just finished our 5th IVF cycle, and we had a miracle cycle. We had 4 eggs retrieved. So I previously had grown 1 egg 3 months in a row. So 4 eggs retrieved, just like in May. This time 2 fertilized, just like in May. 2 day 3 embryos, just like in May. But this time, both of them made it to day 5. So we had 2 day 5 blasts frozen. We sent them for PGT testing, and we actually just found out yesterday that one of them is normal. So we know that my eggs can make a normal embryo, which is super exciting for us, and it's fairly good quality. So it's sitting there frozen while we decide what to do next. And yeah, that's kind of where our journey's at. So it's been crazy. I live in Northern Ontario, and obviously it's winter right now while we're doing this interview. So every single time there's a storm, it's a big joke now on Instagram. It's the day that I have to drive to Toronto for monitoring. So I normally wake up at 3 a.m., drive to Markham for my 8-ish scan, finish the scan, and then, take a little break in a coffee shop or work for a couple hours and then drive home. So yeah, it's in the snowstorm, it's a nightmare, but, yes, I'm hoping we do want to do one more IVF cycle now that we figured out maybe androgel priming is, our secret weapon. We're going to try that and do a 6th IVF cycle. And then, we're going to talk about transferring again. And, it's exciting, but it's also super scary for me because we've already had 2 consecutive miscarriages. We didn't know whether or not those embryos were normal, but typically at my age, half of them would be. So maybe one of them was, maybe they weren't. So yeah, it's terrifying now going into transfer again. Some people are like, you must be so excited. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This is the scariest moment of my whole life. I'm not excited for it at all. So yeah, it's kind of like you have to take that leap of faith to potentially open yourself up to, your biggest dream. But in order to do that, you're also risking opening yourself up to your biggest heartbreak. And that the fact those things have to simultaneously exist is very unfortunate and very challenging. But yeah, hopefully, this will be the secret key. We're going to run every test in the book on my body before we transfer. And yeah, our hope is that one day we'll be able to achieve a live birth with my eggs. And I have no idea where our journey is going to take us, but having been through this and, on this journey and all the people I've met and stories I've heard, I've become really passionate about infertility advocacy. So I've been doing, I sent a letter to my work about expanding our coverage of fertility benefits. I feel like we were lucky that remortgaging our house was even an option for us. I don't know what we would have done if that was not. And I don't think that that's a choice that anyone should have to make. I think everyone, regardless of their, what disease they might have or their circumstance or their income level, I think everyone deserves a fair chance at building a family. And I think it's really unfortunate that as a society, the World Health Organization recognizes infertility as a disease, but I don't feel that society does. And I feel a lot of times when I'm talking to people, they're like, why don't you adopt? Typically people not in the infertility community. Why don't you foster kids? Why don't you do donor eggs or donor embryos? Or what about international adoption? All options that we've obviously considered already. Nobody goes through this for years without considering those options. It's not the first time that, some miracle idea somebody has out of nowhere that I've never thought about. But I don't think that's fair for people to say, because most of those people have chosen to have genetic children, the same ones offering these options who didn't choose them. And I also feel, with other types of diseases, imagine that an organ isn't working. We don't say, have you thought about not living with that organ? Or have you thought about, these alternatives? Like, that would be ridiculous, right? And totally inappropriate, especially when someone's opening up about the challenges of their disease. So I hope that as a society, we can get to a point where that stigma starts to get erased, and where people can approach things from an empathetic position because they understand the struggles a lot more. I also find it super annoying that on TV, almost everybody that does IVF gets a baby after the first cycle. Come on, can we be a little more representative? Because I can't even blame people for thinking these things, but yeah, I think that's why conversations like this are just so important. It's raising awareness, erasing that stigma, helping everybody find their safe space and their community, and sharing coping strategies that work for each other, because it's all we can do on this journey. Is try to get through it together. And we're a community, we're a society, and I think working together we can all come out of this better in the end. I also found some interesting research that some countries that fund IVF did some studies, and they found that the cost of creating the child through IVF is actually less than the taxes that person will return back to the government in their life. So it's an investment. And some countries, the number was 2 to 3 times the return, which is huge still, 200 to 300%. Some it was as high as 700 or 800%. So I'm really passionate about government funding of IVF, and I'm hoping that I can, do a little bit more advocacy work to try to raise awareness on these kinds of things and help, not necessarily for me, because we're almost done our IVF journey. We're ready to close that chapter soon, but for the next people who are going to go through this in the future, so that the financial challenges of it was definitely one of the most stressful aspects of it for us. And when you're already going through one of the most stressful times in your life, women with infertility have stress levels as high as those with cancer, in HIV. So you're already going through that. Maybe we can alleviate at least by taking away the financial stressors. And then there's secondary benefits to the economy too. Those people tend to be, happier. They might be able to afford treatment earlier and find success earlier, and not have to take leaves from work, So I think there's a lot to say for why it benefits society to make sure that people have access to the treatments they need to cure their disease of infertility, right?
Exactly. The great thing as well about this community is everyone's so willing to share their success or their information. And obviously, if you've got diminished ovarian syndrome, it's you need as much help as you can get. Like, if you hear something that's worked for someone, you want to sort of go, okay, is this a possibility? Can I try it? Like, it's worked for them. Can it work for me?
Right? Yes.
One of the things that I need to tell you about is I actually spoke to a lady the other day, and she has the same thing, the diminished ovarian reserve. And she said she wasn't getting much until she tried, I do believe it was like a heightened, like progesterone type pill or something. And she said they doubled the amount they retrieved.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and she said egg quality, like the success rate of like getting to the end, she said, was higher as well. I'll double check
Wow.
that interview and I'll link it below.
Yeah.
And all of our speakers are going to be getting opened up to the interviews early anyway. But
Yay.
when's your next cycle that you were planning?
4 weeks from now. So right now we're androgel priming, which
Okay.
for us, I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but so far androgel has doubled my antral follicle count and doubled our blasts.
Yeah.
But that, I don't know if that's just a coincidence. No, we could have just gotten lucky, and that's another challenge with these things, right? Is everybody's different, and every body is different every month. So, we might have just gotten lucky, but both months that I primed with androgel, we had double the antral follicles. So my normal is like 2 to 6, and then with androgel priming, I had 10 and 11. So we'll see. So in 4 weeks, I go in for baseline, and then we start IVF 6. Yeah.
I'll rewatch that interview and then send you the information, because then you'll have it and you can kind of
Yay.
mention it. And if it's something that you can add to your protocol and it will help, then great.
Yeah.
If not, then at least you had the information. So I'll get that information.
I love to learn.
Yeah, I mean, it's any chance, anything that could possibly just heighten those chances is worth thinking about or trying. And after all the women I've spoken to, I just, your heart breaks. It's so painful. It's a painful thing to go through. And you're right, like, there's so many layers. You've got the money, the emotions, you got the physical. And you don't have to be excited to get a transplant. You don't. You're about to go through the same thing you've been through before. So all those fears, all those memories are going to come in because you're about to do it again.
Yeah.
Hopefully with different results this time, but it is completely normal to feel, those kind of negative thoughts of, is this even work?
Oh yeah. It's so hard. And it was my second pregnancy. I had to work really, really hard to get there. And now I can only imagine how hard I'm going to have to work to, get excited and believe it's actually happening. And I mean, I think it's going to take me an extremely long time to be able to get those feelings again this time. If we even, make it to transfer and get a positive beta. Like, there's just so many hurdles. But it'd be really nice to get another embryo in IVF 6. If androgel is our secret weapon, then maybe. I feel like that would take a little bit of weight off my shoulders, because we suspect I might have endometriosis, and that may have caused our other miscarriages. And if that's the case, then we might never be successful to carry an embryo. So, we may need to look at other options. So I'm hoping that that's not the case, and we are going to run a lot of tests before transferring again. But I'd feel so much better if we had 2 embryos frozen, ready to go. I feel like it's really scary after all these IVF cycles to only have one chance. All that money we've spent, all that time and stress. Like it is not going to be a pleasant experience at this point. So I'm hoping that everything goes smoothly with IVF 6 and we can maybe get one more embryo. But if not, I will be heavily relying on this community to make it through that transfer whenever we get to it.
Well, we will be here for you and cheering.
Yay.
Crying with you, and whatever you need, we'll be there. I mean, I've cried tears of joy. I've cried tears of, sadness and everything. Gosh, a variety of women now. just from seeing the stories, and I think there's so much compassion and love in this community. you're definitely not alone, and we'll be there feeling
No.
whatever you're feeling, we'll be there with you.
Yay. I appreciate
So
that.
you said you feel like you're near the end of your IVF journey. Have you decided this is
Mhm.
the last cycle?
We haven't made that decision together yet. It's just, it's so hard. Like even just after the last IVF cycle, I was so worn out. I wasn't myself for like quite a few days after. So just like recognizing the impacts to my mental health, and it's physically traveling there and going through the shots and the procedures, and my hormones being out of whack, and the complications and the financial impacts, huge amount of money. It's also, when I first went through IVF, my first cycle, I thought like I was worried about the physical things. But then after I started getting into the cycle, I realized, for me, the needles are not so scary. I kind of got used to it. And then, that part now, it's like, oh, gotta go take my shots, gotta go brush my teeth. It's not like it's not a scary thing anymore, even though I had severe anxiety before my first needle. So the physical stuff is like for me, like part of it, but the mental and emotional aspects are like unreal challenging. And trying to juggle, working full time, and all this traveling, and being away from my partner and my home and my pets, even though my puppy can be really annoying and bark at really bad times. So it's a lot mentally. And so I don't know how many more cycles I might have left in me. And I think at some point too, there's a possibility that my eggs may never work, right? With poor egg quality, sometimes the embryos kind of like run out of energy. And so, just because we can make a normal embryo, there's still more hurdles to go, to see whether this will work or not. I know some people have done like 19 IVF cycles and then they found success, but it's very difficult when you're paying out of pocket and having to do all the traveling. I don't know if I have it in me. So yeah, we'll see. We have talked about other options. The challenge is that we're not on the same page about what the next option would be if we're not able to have an embryo with our own eggs together. So, as much as we have considered and discussed other options, I don't know what our next steps would look like. So we're just kind of really trying to stay hopeful that this one embryo will work. I remember growing up, I used to want a huge family, like 4 or 5 kids. We were 5 growing up in my family. And then surprise infertility. Now, like I just want one because I mean, to have 2 would be incredible, obviously. But I feel like I'm greedy to want to at this point because the chance of us having one is so slim already. And also, I don't want to go through IVF again. I would love to be able to close the chapter on treatments of infertility, even though I'll never be able to close the chapter on infertility. I'll carry that forever. But to be able to stop the treatments, for the sake of my mental health is something that I'm hopeful will happen for us after this next cycle.
Well,
It's crazy.
yeah.
Yeah. It I think too, like somebody told me, I wish I could quote a specific person. I have no idea who it was, but they said infertility is like a part-time job on top of a full-time job. And it is so true. I sat down the other day and I was thinking, in the past 2 weeks, how much time have I spent on my full-time job? A lot. And how much time have I spent just dealing with infertility treatment stuff? And I almost had spent the same amount. It was like 40 hours on my job and 40 hours on infertility stuff because, when I travel to a monitoring appointment, it's basically a 12-hour affair. I wake up at 3 a.m., drive there for 4 hours, got to get there a half hour early, sitting there waiting for my appointment. Then they're a little bit behind, got to wait for the scan, got to wait for the nurse because they got to pick up more meds.
Wow.
And then, okay, drive back home. Yeah. So I'm home, at 3 p.m. That's 12 hours. So it's very easy to get it to the level of a full-time job when you're in the middle of your IVF treatment. And even though, we've only completed 5 IVF cycles, we had 3 other IVF cycles canceled. We had, 5 IUI attempts, only 2 of which we actually went through with in the end. So we have been in treatments and doing monitoring for a very long time, with this pattern of, every day or two traveling to Toronto. I do get a hotel when it gets near the end where it's every day they want to see me. So the last like 2 or 3 days. But even then, I'm applying for travel grants. I'm writing, fertility benefit advocacy letters to my work. I'm trying to raise awareness on my Instagram account and connect with people on there for the sake of my mental health, so I can survive infertility treatments. So, all of that together, yeah, it's a full-time job on top of a full-time job during treatment months. And it never leaves your mind. It's just always there. So, even when you're not actively doing something for infertility, it's bogging you down. Yeah. So I think it's a very difficult thing to go through. At the end of my life, I can confidently say that infertility will have been one of the hardest things that I had to go through. And I've been through some hard things, but it's the length of it and the fact that it so drastically alters my own life forever that I find it's a very unique kind of roller coaster grief to go through.
The traveling must be exhausting. I mean, one car trip. Mm-hmm. I live in the country and I'm 2 hours from the city, and one car trip just to is enough for me. We get home and I'm like, oh I need to recover now.
It's exhausting.
Drive 4 hours. My goodness. And you have to recover for like 2 days after that, right?
Oh yeah. I get home, I'm burnt. Like eat, go to bed, unpack,
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I'm always packing bags because I never know, like, oh, we're going to want to see you again tomorrow. Okay, well then now I'm going to get a hotel, right? So it's always last minute. It's always like up in the air and cancel. I haven't even been able to book an appointment for a haircut for like 9 months. I haven't had my haircut in 9 months. It's ridiculously long right now.
Well,
because I've had to cancel it over and over and over. See? Maybe this is an infertility thing.
Just don't bother.
I just keep having to cancel it. Like, sorry, I'm in Toronto. Oh no, I can't. I'll be recovering from my retrieval that day. It's like always something.
Hang on.
So
get someone to come to you. Get someone to come to you. If you want a haircut, I'm sure there'll be someone who you can just be like, I want a haircut right now, and then they'll just, they'll come.
This morning.
I'm growing it. I just gave up. I was like, I'm sick of going and getting my hair.
Just run with it.
I just grow. It's fine. Yeah. And then I felt it like tickling the like my butt cheeks, and I was like, that's getting long.
Yeah. Yes. Maybe I felt that in the shower this morning. I was like, oh my God. Good times.
Yeah, it's not until that it's like, okay, it's time.
Right. So here's another crazy thing about the travel. So I don't know if you talk to people who live in Northern Ontario who are doing IVF before, but we have a program in Northern Ontario because we pay the same amount of taxes as Southern Ontario does. Provincial tax, which funds healthcare based on your income, doesn't matter where you live, right? So because they have better healthcare down south, they created this program to try to make it a bit more fair called the Northern Ontario Travel Grant. So if you have to travel to Southern Ontario for a medical treatment referred by your physician, so required treatment, then they will give you a certain amount of, per kilometer refund. I think there's like 100-kilometer deductible, but for me, the amount of trips I've done like 30 trips to Toronto, 30 12-hour days. It's a lot of money, like over $5,000. So I filled in all these grants, and it's a lot of work. Like every single time you got to get it filled in, and they ask what it is, and they make mistakes. You got to go back. And I submitted them, and I got the letter back, and I was so excited. It was a big, thick envelope. I'm like, oh, that's probably all the checks. Like they probably didn't send one check. They probably sent like 30, So I open it up, and the first page I open is a letter, and I'm like, there's no check here. And the letter says, oh, regarding your grant, September 16, 2021, it has been denied for the following reason. And then there's a bullet point that says the medical treatment is not covered by provincial healthcare, not covered by OHIP, which is our provincial government. And then I look at the next letter, and a letter for every single denied application. Not a single one of them was approved. And what's insane is that I have talked to other people in Northern Ontario, and they all got the grant. So I guess I just got flagged for some reason. So I'm in the process of appealing it, and Dr. Garcia has kindly written a letter of support that she feels that absolutely this is the intention of the program. No one should have to incur additional cost to travel to Southern Ontario for treatment. That's why the program exists. And so, hoping that we can appeal it for myself, and also maybe change the program for the future for other people to help try to reduce some of that cost, because the gas and the hotels, they really add up. It's just, you're already paying tens of thousands of dollars for treatments, and then on top of that, having to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for gas and the mileage on your car. Then your car is worth less when you go trade it in, right? Like I put 20,000 kilometers on my last vehicle just from these trips. So yeah, it's just crazy. Like the impacts of it, it just like reverberates into every little part of your life. And
yeah,
it's everywhere.
It just compounds.
Yeah. Yeah, like you just, like, I'm sitting here looking around my desk, like I have like my travel grant stuff on one side. Here I have an appointment reminder because I have to go for a scan. They're going to see if they can find any endometriosis on my ovaries, which I have to travel to Ottawa for just 6 hours in the other direction from where I live. Because we can't do that kind of scan here. Yeah, so it's just like it's always one thing after another. I open my fridge, there's my leftover drugs from the last cycle that I'll be using in 4 weeks for my next cycle. And then I go into my spare bedroom, and there's my needle bin, gotta go get that emptied because I'm gonna put more in. Yeah. It's everywhere. It's everywhere in the house, everywhere we look. And it's just constant reminders all over the place. Even just, watching TV or walking outside, and you see cute families. I remember the day that I got the call that my second pregnancy had no heartbeat, that we had another blighted ovum. My neighbors were having a party next door, and there was kids yelling and playing outside, and all day I had been all excited about it and thinking how cute they all were, and like creeping on the deck, like, oh, they have a trampoline and a clown. And and then after I got that call, it was like I couldn't even listen anymore. It was just total reminder of what I was missing out on. And yeah, it's just, so you have those reminders like within your own space, and then you have the reminders of what you're missing from other people's space and experiences. So it's just always there. Mm-hmm.
There's also those memories in certain rooms or holding certain things as well. Hold on to those. Like I actually had my miscarriage just behind me. When it finally all came out, I had a blighted ovum as well. So for me, like walking in here the next few days after was kind of weird.
Yeah.
And obviously I used the bathroom when I started spotting the first time, and that was so every time I went to the bathroom I just kept checking.
Oh yeah.
And I still get moments of it now, and it just drives me nuts.
Yeah.
And I've said
out of nowhere,
walked in a few times, and I'm like, I'm sorry, and he's like, you're checking again, aren't you? And I was like, yeah.
Yes.
You can't not.
You can't not. No.
Yeah,
man,
I'm
it's trauma.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
so sorry you have to drive so much. That sucks.
It does. It really does.
You're like,
You know, and
hindsight, maybe we should have lived
oh.
south or
Yeah. No, we thought about it. We thought about, I want to say we were half seriously talking about one of us getting a job at Starbucks because they have IVF treatment coverage for their part-time employees. And I have a really good job, and so does my partner. So, you know, if it wasn't for the fact that infertility is already a full-time job on top of a full-time job, we may have ended up there. But we did talk about maybe we should move to a city that has employers where we could switch careers and work for somewhere with IVF coverage, because it's essentially, a $30,000 to $50,000 signing bonus, depending on what the limit is. I just found out the other day that the provincial government, I don't know if it's all employees or some employees, but for their own staff who work for provincial government, they cover unlimited IVF treatments per life at clinics within hospitals in Ontario. Yeah. So there's like three IVF clinics that those employees could go to. So there are some employer coverages, and I think like more and more as people become aware of it, because it is such a good tool to attract and retain talented employees, like to have us consider like pivot, and not only that, but move to another city. Like that's huge power. Just to get treatment coverage. So,
but like you said, it's like 50
and
grand. It's like, that's a lot of
yeah,
money.
it's a huge signing bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody gave me $5,000, I'd be happy.
Yeah, I mean, because
Yeah.
you're not just talking about, it's like you said, you're not just talking about IVF, you're talking about the travel expenses, the food, the hotels. Because let's face it, when we're traveling that long, we're going to get takeout. We're going to get like food on the way, because
exactly.
you
Yeah.
can't pack a whole like 2 days worth of food.
Grocery shopping. No.
I mean, you could get a car fridge freezer and get those little like camping stoves, and you just cook your meal out of your car. But
right,
when you're going through all this, you don't need those extra things to think about. So you're going to get takeout. You're going to get, which it's not helpful, because it's just, and then you're feeling guilty because it's more money. So
right, yeah.
No, that makes sense. So you're saving like all this time and money, like if they're gonna
yeah, right. And I think in the US there's like, I don't know, a dozen states that mandate coverage of IVF if the companies have over a certain number of employees. And I hope that we can get that in Canada, like if the government is not going to expand the coverage of IVF. We did have our 4th IVF cycle partially covered by the Ontario government. So they cover part of one IVF cycle per life for everybody in Ontario, but it didn't cover, certain things. So we ended up saving like $4,000 because of the kind of IVF that we're doing, mini IVF. And then we had to pay the difference. So it wasn't like crazy. And we still, have all the other expenses. So yeah, we could definitely do better. I think it's crazy that we spend money on pronatalist policies to try to convince people who can have kids but don't want any more to have more, instead of spending money on IVF for the people who want to have kids but can't. Like that should be a pronatalist policy for sure. Directly increasing the population for sure. So yeah, there's I could talk forever, honestly, about infertility advocacy and coverage and accessibility and fairness. And, some people have said to me, literally, I'm not even kidding you, when I talk about this stuff, they say, why should a fertile person have to pay for an infertile person's treatments? And you know what I answered? Why should an infertile person have to pay for a fertile person's treatments? Because in Ontario, all of the pregnancy care is completely covered. The NICU stays, the healthcare for the children, the education, all that stuff is paid for by taxes that I'm contributing to, and for which I'm not able to get a benefit from.
Yep, all
And
of us.
so I think it's more, yeah, it's just about society and well-functioning society and growing. In Canada, we have a particular challenge with our healthcare system, which I don't think is unique, where we have people living longer and longer and having less and less kids. So we have this like pyramid now where there's less people trying to support more people who are at a stage of life where they need a lot more healthcare. And if we don't do anything to change that, it's only going to continue to get worse and worse. So I
Yeah.
think that this is one long-term strategy that we could use to help alleviate that.
Apparently this is
As
happening all around the world at the moment.
all
There's
around the world.
a
Yeah.
very
Mhm.
sharp increase in
Yeah.
pregnancy losses as well. Pregnancy losses.
Yes.
There's been an increase in infertility, and there's been
Uh-huh.
an increase in people just not having kids and
Yeah.
not wanting them until
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot later, and then having a
Mhm.
obviously the increase in
Mhm.
infertility and all that later, because
Yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
we end up with things
Mhm.
like going through menopause early and
Yeah.
stuff
Yep.
as well.
Completely unexpectedly. Yeah.
It's just we live in such a weird time,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, if you
Yep.
think about it, you
Yeah.
go back 20, 30, 50 years, and people are
Mm-hmm.
all about have kids,
Yeah.
get
Huge
married early,
families. Yeah.
all young. It's
Yeah.
all like get married, have
Yeah.
kids,
Mhm.
and it's all about the family
Mhm.
unit, building that. And you have the baby
Yeah.
boom,
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
lots of
Yeah.
baby boomers,
Yeah.
um
Hmm.
yeah, and then now we're at this time where everyone's just like, oh, I can wait, we'll just
Right?
leave it.
Yeah.
You have troubles, we'll just do IVF.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? I find too it's challenging for women because a lot of men don't want to settle down young, right? Like I
Yeah.
remember being in my early 20s and a lot of the guys I was attracted to, they didn't want serious relationships yet, that wasn't what they were looking for. So I think that's really scary for women compared to and it's not that infertility only impacts women because it's actually almost a 50-50 split of women and men. But with women, fertility tends to decrease at a much faster rate. And so I think that's why it's particularly scary, when you have that. And, of course, the LGBTQ communities, some of the only ways that they can have biological children, if they do want them, is often with IVF treatment. And so I think from an equity, diversity, and inclusion perspective, single parents, whatever it is, people to, I have a friend, she had cancer, ovarian cancer at like age 23 or 24, and she had to freeze her eggs. And the government paid for one cycle, which didn't get her a lot of eggs. I think she got like 6 eggs. And she had to make a difficult decision on whether or not she would pay to freeze more eggs or, put all her eggs in that one basket, for lack of a better term. So, there's a lot to be said for, fairness and, well-functioning society and just, keeping people happy and productive so they continue to contribute to society is important too,
Yeah,
you know?
I've always found it crazy because some people will make those comments about healthcare, and then you're like, well, I mean, I'm paying for smokers to have treatments. I'm paying
Exactly.
for
Yeah.
people who are,
Mhm.
morbidly obese to have
Yeah.
treatments. And
Yeah.
those people made life choices that brought them to where they're at. And they're in the hospital now, and I'm paying for their treatments because everyone else is paying for their treatments because we pay taxes. So if
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
if we're saying, right, we're going to pay for people's healthcare, then why
Mhm.
like we're talking about starting life, we're talking about creating life and actually
Mhm.
helping the economy and helping actually
Yeah. Yeah.
build
Yeah.
a society, and you can't do that without people
No.
and money.
No. It's so true. Yeah.
I mean,
The
Japan's
example I
facing,
like to use,
yeah. So what are you going to
the
say?
example I like to use is, a drunk driver gets in a car accident he goes to that hospital and he's treated equal to the other victims of the accident, right? Like our healthcare system doesn't discriminate against people who have intentionally caused themselves harm at cost to society. You know, we treat them, we make them better. What's the disease? Let's fix it. What's the problem? Let's fix that. But not with infertility. And that is just, it's mind blowing to me that we still have so far to go to get people to think that. And, you know, I think there's also a lot of people who have a little stigma against infertility in the sense that they think that it is something that most people can change on their own, which is not true. You know, I can't change my diet to become more fertile, or, you know, I'm already taking every supplement in the book, but there's no magical supplement that's going to get me pregnant.
Yeah.
You know, people say just relax, don't overthink it. Yeah, I did that for the first 9 months. Didn't work. So,
Well,
you know, I was super chill.
the lady
I
with
really believed it was going to work.
yeah, the lady with cystic
Yeah.
fibrosis, you know, there's nothing she could do about it. She has cystic fibrosis.
Right?
There's no
Yeah.
cure for that. So
Yeah. Go on a vacation.
yeah, go
No.
no,
Yeah.
that's
Just relax. Yeah.
gosh.
Stop thinking about it. It'll happen when you least expect it. Really? If it was
Look,
that easy, I'd be so pregnant.
I've heard stories where women that does happen for women. But it
Oh yeah.
rarely in the case of diminished ovarian reserve. You know, when you actually have
Well,
those genetic problems or syndromes
mhm.
or
Yeah.
issues, you know, you're talking about a whole different circumstance. It's not a case of, oh, go and relax and
Oh
everything
yeah.
will happen for you.
Yeah.
You have to deal with whatever it
Uh-huh.
is the issue is.
Uh-huh.
You know, some people have really bad like progesterone
Mhm.
levels, so they take progesterone
Mhm.
and then they are more fertile because they had that low.
Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's what tipped them over the edge and actually got them pregnant, got
Uh-huh.
them to that
Uh-huh.
point. So there
Yeah.
can be a mixture as well. I've had some ladies say that they had a whole like line of issues, and I was just like, wow, that's a lot
Yeah.
to deal with. Like one of those things
Uh-huh.
is enough, but you're like, you've got all these other
Right?
things as well.
Yeah.
How are you
Yeah.
doing that in your life? And it's a full-time job. It's not just IVF being a full-time job. It's
Mhm.
dealing with the issue of whatever it is that you have that becomes a full-time job as well. And some of those issues,
Oh
some of them
yeah.
are actually lifelong and life-threatening. Like one woman,
Mhm.
her blood clots a lot. So she has
Oh
to,
wow.
yeah. So she was saying, you know, she's lucky that she only has to
Yeah.
take thinners at specific points in her life. But other women, some
Wow.
of them actually have to take it every day to
Yeah.
survive,
Yeah.
to like live and not, yeah. So
Wow.
there are crazy, crazy things that, you know, we can have that's wrong with that's
Mhm.
kind of wrong with us. um
Yeah.
that yeah changes our lives and makes us have to just yeah spend our whole
Right.
time dealing with it and surviving
Mhm.
rather than thriving,
Mhm.
or however you want to say
Yeah.
it.
Right. Another thing too that kills me is, you know, we talk about how mental health is so important and we provide treatment for anxiety and depression. But what if the treatment for anxiety and depression is solving the disease, right? Solving the problem, helping the person achieve a live birth? Like, should we not be investing in that? If mental health is so important, you know, like, and I've also heard the argument like IVF is expensive. Well, first of all, there's like 7 studies that have shown that the cost of the IVF treatment is returned in the child's life and taxes. So that point's already mute. But, you know, we don't say, oh, sorry, you know, your brain surgery is going to cost $500,000. So, you know, you're out. No, we do not cover treatment of disease in any other scenario, you know, that has a chance of success, um, just because it's expensive. That would be extremely unfair. And why would we take away coverage at a time when that person obviously needs it most, right? Like, I would be totally okay going to pay for my antibiotics for $40. You know, that's not going to change my life for me personally. But for someone to say, here's your IVF bill, you know, $30,000 needed for your next cycle.
Wow.
that's life-changing, like most people don't have that sitting in their bank account. Most people are looking at yeah. And on what's crazy too is like on top of that, you have to come up with these lump sums for treatments. You're already digging into your disposable income every month for other things like the travel and the supplements. Oh my God, the supplements are so expensive. But you have to do it because they increase your chance of success by like 3%. And and we were talking about how, just relax and it'll work because, everybody knows a story. And I know stories too. But here's the thing, right? Is I have a 1% chance every month of conceiving naturally. And if this IVF cycle doesn't work out and we move on and we do other things with our life, we could in 2 years conceive naturally when I'm just relaxing. And for some people, that will statistically happen, within 3 months of them stopping treatment. And so obviously they're going to spread the word like, yeah, I just relaxed. Yeah, we had just given up. Yeah, it's a great story to tell. Telephone game. Now everybody knows the story. But that doesn't mean that that's the rule for everybody. That's just, this person won the lottery. It doesn't mean go buy a lottery ticket because you're going to win the lottery. No, you're just telling the great story of the person who won the lottery. It doesn't have any bearing on my personal experience. And, like you said, some people have a 0% chance too, right? So it can be very hurtful to receive comments like that. Like, unless you're the person's doctor, you don't know their medical situation. Yeah.
I think it can be hard when you're on the outside and you're looking at a person, you love them and you care about them, and they're saying, I'm aching, yeah. I'm longing, I want a baby, and they're like, okay, how can I fix this? How can I make it better?
Yeah.
And and it's really lovely that people try, but also really hard.
Yeah.
And I think we have to put that in our heads of this person loves me. Even if they don't, right? This person obviously has some kind of care for me and they're trying to help. Because if we have that in our heads and we just try and feel only love for that person when they're trying to love us, I think we find it easier to deal with those comments. Like, I've had to fight so much with my own brain to kind of get to that point where I accept some of those comments as what they are. And what they are is someone trying to care for me. They don't know how to do that, and they're saying the wrong thing, but they're trying. And so I've tried to hold on to that rather than being angry, because anger just bang.
Oh yeah.
So quick.
Yeah.
So if you try and just feel love for them, it makes it so much easier to kind of, hey, like, I love you too. Please don't say that.
But exactly. It's an opportunity to educate too. But you're right. I don't resort to anger very often. It just kind of like, they say the comment and I internally roll my eyes.
Yeah.
And then I say, sometimes I just like completely will come out with it. Like, that comment is not really super helpful. I actually was just looking for a listening ear. And then sometimes I'll like feed into it a bit to help them self-realize. So like somebody was like, can't you adopt? Wouldn't you be able to adopt? And I'm like, yes, sure. How much do you know about the adoption process in Ontario? Like, how many children have you adopted, or do you know people that have adopted? Like, what's the process? Because I think a lot of people don't realize that not everybody qualifies for adoption. Like, I called Adoption Ontario, and we cannot admit that we are trying to have a child and start the application process for adoption at the same time. So in order to become a mom, I have to commit to not trying to become a mom for years, because the process to apply is 1 year, which you might not even, get approved for whatever reason. And then you're on the wait list, which I have a friend who's been on the wait list for 3.5 years and hasn't gotten a single call. Like, that's very scary for me. I can't give up being a mom in order to have a chance at being a mom, right? So adoption is not an option for me. It sucks. It really does. But I totally get why they do it. They don't want somebody who's gonna, they're gonna invest all this time and money for a whole year, and then they end up having their own kid and they're out. So it's very challenging for an infertile person to adopt. It's, you know, if I had a 0% chance, it would be a lot easier for me to move on to that route. But because we still have a chance where we are right now, it's very difficult, and it's very triggering for me when people say things like that, because I'm like, you know, I wish it was that easy. I wish I could go and sign up and, you know, have a baby in a year. That would be wonderful. But that's not how the process works. You know, so sometimes I try to educate a little bit, because I always think, you know, I don't want them to say that to somebody else. Someday, like maybe I can teach them how to, you know, respond in some way that's more empathetic and productive and supportive. So yeah, that the just adopt comment is one of the most challenging ones. The just relax, the just adopt, even though it starts with just, should not be said to anybody going through any kind of issue.
Yeah, don't just anything. Just
No.
zip, just zip.
Yes.
You know,
Just listen. Just listen.
Yeah. Catch them before they do it. Just zip.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just,
I actually, the best answer I ever had opening up about my struggles to someone, she totally, I had tears in my eyes. She just handled it so well. She said, I had no idea you were going through that. That sounds incredibly difficult. I can't even begin to imagine what you're going through. So I really don't know what to say. So I'm just going to say that, you know, I feel totally awful, and I'm here for whatever you need. You know, if you want to talk, if there's anything I could do, you ever need a friend to drive somewhere with, you know, I'm here for you. And that was great. That was exactly what I needed. You know, perfect. No unsolicited advice, you know, supportive, empathetic. And like, it's okay to acknowledge that I don't know what to say. That's a great response. But coming from an openness to learning, right?
yeah, I mean, her response was humble, you know, and I think
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a problem, because a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, if I admit I don't know, you know, then I don't know, you know, and I think it's that subconscious kind of, you know, pride that kind of stops them from saying, I don't actually know how to handle this, and I don't know what to say to you.
Yes.
So it's just, if everyone was a bit more humble and kind of like, you know, honest about what they know, I think it would be a lot better. But unfortunately, we don't live in that world.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Hopefully someday.
Yeah. Well, I am so grateful that you're speaking to me about your journey, and that we were able to have this chat, because we made a few tries and it just
covered a lot.
But we finally,
I know. Oh man.
But gosh, I'm going to pray for you and your this 6th cycle, and I'll keep in touch with me. I'll be checking your page anyway.
I'll be checking yours too.
And gosh, like I'm so hopeful for you. I really hope that this happens for you. And if it doesn't,
hopeful for us both.
you know, feng shui needs to happen in your house. And it's like a whole change, like in the house, and so many other things. I'm thinking about doing that. We're going to go for a big change soon, like moving and stuff. So I'm like so ready. I like, you know, you're with all the connections in this house. I'm so ready to not be in this house.
Yes, right. Like
too many memories, but I'll be praying for you, and yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for so many women.
Thanks. I'm hopeful too. I'm scared, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for speaking with me, and keep in touch.
Thanks for the invite, and thanks for organizing this. I think it's very exciting, and I'm really excited for the event in May.
Me too. I'm kind of terrified as well, but I hope I hope this helps, because it's really been emotional for me to talk to.
Oh yeah.
So I really hope that this actually helps some women, because it's a terrible all of this.
It definitely will. And we know, because we have, you know, accessed that community and those resources and made those connections, and we felt a real difference from it. So
definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be rooting for you. I'm sure so many women are rooting for you. And regardless of what happens and what choices you make after this cycle and what happens in the end, you know, you're an amazing woman, and
Aw, thank
you
you.
put up a good fight. So whatever
I appreciate
happens,
that.
yeah, whatever happens, just know that you did everything.
Thank you. And I'll be praying for you too, Ella.
Thank you. All right, bye.
Bye.
Please note that all speakers, including experts and professionals, express information, views, and opinions that should not be used to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any medical conditions. If you have a medical issue, please consult a qualified professional. Speakers voice their own views, opinions, and conclusions, and they may not reflect the views, opinions, and conclusions of other speakers. Ella Rose, The Joy of Sunflowers, and its sponsors may not endorse all or any of the views, opinions, or conclusions expressed.